I think when I said start, I think we all realized that he could play DN. He's established that on film. He's established that in camp. He's established that in some of the All-Star games he went to. But we had a real pressing need at Mike linebacker, and we also have a guy that not only did he play DN but played running back at a really high level. And a lot of times, those guys that are really good linebackers were really good high school running backs as well. So you're talking about a guy that has the body type, that has the speed, the strength, the quickness, the playmaking ability, those types of things that we think he's got a chance. And really, since he showed up on campus, has done a really good job. So it's obviously one thing to do morning workouts and another thing to what you do in the weight room and those types of things. But he's never played the position, so that's going to be a challenge. Just from a fundamental and a technique standpoint, and from a read standpoint. But then also the playbook, because at linebacker, now you have to take a little bit more command. You have to take a little bit more control, whether you're playing Mike or Will, our two box linebackers. So all those things kind of factor into it. But so far, so good. I remember during the recruiting process, there got to be a point where some of the players were like, "Coach, why are we putting up with this?" I don't see anybody saying that anymore. The morning workouts, they're watching them work. Now they see why. He committed and decommitted and committed back again. And I think, at some point there was some coaches and players questioning if we ought to go on this roller coaster. I haven't had one person question the roller coaster since he showed up on campus. And I would also make this argument to you. He's really done a good job of, from a maturity standpoint and from an accountability standpoint, and from a teammate standpoint. He's been very respectful of the older guys and is working like crazy and competing like crazy. But it's been really good, But he's got a lot of guys in front of him. I know there's guys like Cooper, who's been waiting for this opportunity, and he's going to fight with everything he's got, And there's a number of guys like that they've been kind of waiting for their turn, with Jason Cabinda kind of holding down that position for a long time. And Brandon Smith, who I was with yesterday at the National Football Foundation luncheon. So we're just trying to create as much competition at that position as we can, so we can find a two deep that we think we can win with.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
To follow that up, is Jan Johnson still in the mix at Mike? And secondly, you talked a year ago optimistically about the offensive line and what it can do last season. What do you think it has to do to take it to the next level?
Yeah, I think Jan Johnson I'm glad you brought him up, is kind of like Cooper. They're two guys that have been in the program and have worked really hard and have earned a lot of respect, and it's time for them to take the next step and earn the starting job. But there's going to be there's going to be a lot of competition. There's no doubt about it. Across the board, and that's what we're trying to create. I think the O-line, we're in a situation probably for the first time since we've been here that I think last year, and maybe the end of, the previous year, we got to the point where we had a scholarship two deep for the first time. And now we're what I would call legitimate two deep in terms of, we've been in a situation a little bit like when Trace was the backup quarterback and he was in the two deep, but we were hoping to redshirt him. And we've been in that situation where we've had guys in the two deep that we were hoping to redshirt, or the backup was a redshirt freshman and he was there, but you weren't ready to really, win with him. Where now I think we got a two deep that you can win with in the Big Ten. So instead of having six guys that you feel good about, that you're moving parts all over the place, you still may have a little bit of that, guys that create some flexibility. But, I think there's a two deep where you look across it and you say, the guy that's actually behind that position could go in and play in the game, and you got a chance to play play well enough to win in the Big Ten. So we're bigger, we're stronger, we're more experienced, we have more depth, we have more length. So I think Alex Gellerstedt's probably a really good example. He's a guy that came in here, had only played 1 year offensive line, was kind of a projection. And I'll tell you what, that guy has just worked and worked and worked and and worked, and he never really, it's not like he has, an off season where he takes a major jump, but he just keeps taking steps, positive steps, positive steps, positive steps, with really no setbacks, and he's worked himself into a player. He really has. He's big, he's strong. Even just getting in his stance now, he never looked comfortable his whole freshman year in his stance, and now he's comfortable and he's athletic, and I think he's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. He may have been listed on the depth chart the last couple of years, but I don't know if he was a viable option yet, and I think he is now. And I could say that kind of across the board. Michael Menet is a guy from your area that you usually ask about, and Michael's one of those guys. Nothing wrong with that.
I'm surprised that I didn't ask about
Yeah. Menet. Usually, you're always going to ask about Menet. You're always going to ask about Jan Johnson, which makes sense. I get it. But Menet's another guy we knew was very talented. But doing it at the high school level and doing it here is different, and whether it was, some bumps and bruises or whether just understanding the intensity or whatever it was, it really seems like right now the light has really come on for him, and there's a lot of excitement about him right now. I think everybody always knew he could do it, but it was, each one of these guys kind of got to figure out their own way of what it takes to be the type of player that they want to be and that we need them to be at this level. And it's funny, I was talking this morning with a couple of the coaches and a couple of players that, the hard part is when you compare and contrast. I think that's always kind of a tricky thing for all of us to do, is you compare yourself to somebody else and what they're doing and what their family's like or what kind of car they're driving or how much money they're making, and you're gonna cause yourself a lot of misery that way. And everybody's path is different. Saquon Barkley's path is different than Troy Apke's. But look where Troy Apke is now. And that's the hard part is these guys understanding that, you're going to have a little bit of patience, and you got to tune out all the noise, and you got to focus on the things that you can control. And I just truly believe if you just keep doing the right things day after day after day, at some point you're going to have a breakthrough. And when that breakthrough is, I'm not sure. But I do believe if you stay at it, you keep the right attitude, and you keep working the right way, at some point it's going to break through for you. And that's what you see right now this time of year. You start seeing some guys taking that next step. Or you see other guys struggling because the consistency. They're not able to consistently stick to the model and stick to the plan. So I think that's probably one of the more interesting things from my perspective as a head coach, is watching all these guys that you recruited in high school and you sat in their living rooms, and sometimes you're able to predict how their journey is going to go, and more times than not, you're not able to. But to me, that's the exciting part of coaching college football rather than the NFL is watching these guys mature and grow.
Hey, Coach, I hope you're well. Back in December, you mentioned some comparisons between Aaron Rodgers and Miles Sanders and waiting for a legend to leave. Barkley is gone. How have you seen Miles Sanders step up, and how competitive is that running back group overall for reps?
Yeah, he's really. I know Coach Sider. It's sometimes as coaches, you're too close to it. So I think I always love the value of bringing in fresh eyes. I always ask whenever we hire a new coach and they've been here for a couple months, I ask them to do a report of what they've seen, once they got here. What do they like? What do they don't like? What are they surprised by? How does it compare to the previous institution where they've been? Where are we better than they thought we were going to be? Where are we worse? And that's from a talent standpoint. That's from an organizational standpoint. That's from a facility standpoint. That's all those things. So I think there's a lot of value in fresh eyes. And, we think we got a pretty good idea of what we have with Miles in the running back room, but maybe we're biased by this or biased by that. So someone new comes in, and it's interesting to hear their perspective. And he's been very impressed with Miles, and I think, back to your initial point, I think that's the correct model. I mean, you look at the model that the Packers were able to use when I was there, and you had Brett Favre, and you draft a quarterback in the first round, and you allow him to sit there and learn. I know it's probably not easy to go through, but I've seen the other model fail at a higher percentage rate. You draft a quarterback in the first round, you put them on the field, and they're not necessarily ready. And I think in college, that's what you really hope to do. You hope to have a veteran player that's a big time player, an all conference, all American type player with an exciting player maturing and growing behind him and learning, and then a guy behind him that you're excited about but just isn't ready yet. And we really haven't been at a position where we've had that since we've been here. I think we're getting to that point now, and I think that once this freshman class arrives, we'll have that at most positions. So, to me, that's the right model. I mean, can't imagine that there's a better player for Miles to come up under than Saquon Barkley. And you could make the argument maybe he could have went to some other schools and played as a true freshman, but I don't know if his development would have been to the point where it is now. I think being behind, really good players and being able to study them and grow and be challenged by them is really important. No different than going and recruiting the next guy to come in and push them from behind. So you got someone modeling in front and someone pushing from behind. I think is really important. Really important. So I feel great about the running back room as a whole. Mark Allen's a guy that's done some really good things with the opportunities that he's been given. Journey Brown's a kind of a young, exciting guy that's got a lot of ability and is a freakish athlete in a lot of ways from a testing perspective. So it should be interesting. And I think Jonathan Thomas is the guy that nobody ever really talks about. That wouldn't surprise me if he has like the Troy Apke deal where as a senior comes in and plays really well. One of the more respected guys in our program. So. Excited about that position, especially behind the offensive line. And let's be honest, guys, to think we're going to be able to replace Saquon Barkley with a running back, that's not really what we need to do. We need to replace Saquon Barkley with the running backs that we have. And when I talk about replace Saquon, I'm talking about his production, but try to replace it with the group of running backs that we have, but also with the growth of the offensive line and the development of our tight ends, and still being a team that's difficult to stop because of the firepower that we have at wide receiver and the mobility we have at the quarterback position.